Welcome back. We are now on to day 5 of Unit 4. So today's aim is how do materials move across a semi-permeable membrane with ATP? So there are a few things we should annotate on this aim. The first being the word semi-permeable. We've probably heard this word before, right? We use this word when we talk about the cell membrane. And semi-permeable means that certain substances can pass through while others can't. Right, so certain substances can pass through while others can't. All right, and the second thing we need to annotate is this word ATP. Remember that ATP is that cellular form of energy that our cells use, adenosine triphosphate. But I'm just going to write the word energy. What am I writing here? Energy. All right, so as always, you guys have got a do now question. I want you guys to pause this video, read through those questions, choose your answer, and then press play when you're ready to go over it. So question number 1 says molecules A and B come in contact with the cell membrane of the same cell. Molecule A passes through, oh, that's not a highlighter. Molecule A passes through the membrane, but molecule B does not. Which statement could describe molecules A and B? So we're told that molecule A can pass through the membrane, which means that it's probably pretty small because it can diffuse. Right, so it is a small molecule. But we're also told that molecule B cannot pass through that membrane. It cannot diffuse. So we can infer that it's probably a big molecule. Right, and this might sound pretty familiar to the lab that we did last week. So using that information, you should have concluded that the answer here is D. Molecule A is a simple sugar, which is a small molecule, and molecule B is a starch, which is a big molecule, too big to pass that membrane. All right, question number 2, the diagram below represents movement of a large molecule across a membrane. Which process is best represented in this diagram? So the most important feature that you need to note from this diagram is that it requires this molecule of ATP. So because energy is required for this process, this is going to be an example of active transport because energy is needed. So I'm actually going to put a pause on that picture. We're going to come back and discuss this after we figure out what exactly is active transport. All right, so let's read through this passage. As I read through this, I want you guys to annotate anything that you think is important, and then we will answer the questions together. All right, so the movement of a substance against a concentration gradient is called active transport. When substances are moved from an area of lower concentration to an area of higher concentration, energy is used and work is done. This kind of transport of materials across the membrane is one of the most important activities of cells. Other than using energy from your food to keep you warm, the most important use of energy in your body is to help pump substances across the membranes of your cells by active transport, a process that goes on all the time. Cells get the energy for active transport from ATP molecules. Your cells use the glucose in the food that you eat after it is digested. In a chemical reaction that requires oxygen, the high energy chemical bonds in the glucose molecules are broken. When glucose molecules are broken apart, carbon dioxide and water are formed. The energy levels of the chemical bonds in the carbon dioxide and water are lower than the energy levels in the chemical bonds in the glucose. Thus, energy has been released. ATP is the substance in which cells store this released energy until it is needed. All right, so let's answer these questions. Number 1, active transport is the movement from an area of blank concentration to an area of blank concentration. So hopefully you noticed in the first paragraph that active transport is when we move molecules from a lower concentration to a higher concentration. So this is not diffusion. This is not passive transport. This is active transport. So we're moving molecules from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. So we're moving molecules against the concentration gradient. But the only catch here is because we're moving molecules against the concentration gradient, it requires the use of energy. So this is active transport, energy is required. But where do our cells get the energy that they need to do this? Well, remember that form of cellular energy that we always talk about is none other than ATP. So that energy comes from ATP that our cells produce. I'm going to write that that is adenosine triphosphate. But how do our cells produce ATP? What is that cellular process that produces it? Well, we learned about this in our last unit. That cellular process that produces ATP is known as cellular respiration. Remember, that is how ATP is made. But where does this happen? Which organelle does this process take place in? Well, think back to the powerhouse of the cell and remember that cellular respiration happens in the mitochondria. That is where energy is produced. So that is where ATP is made. Now, number 5, write the equation for this process. So we know that cellular respiration requires 2 things. It requires oxygen and glucose, and those are our reactants. Right? And then it's going to yield or produce ATP, CO2, and H2O. And of course, ATP is that cellular energy that we need. These are the products of that reaction. That is what's produced. Okay. Now, I've given you guys a picture of each of the types of transport that we know by now. We've learned about passive transport. Remember, this is when molecules travel from high to low concentration. Okay, and no energy is required. So we've learned about diffusion, right? The simple diffusion of molecules across the membrane. And we've also learned about facilitated diffusion, where we have to use these things called proteins to move those molecules or to help move them. So here we've got that protein channel, like a tunnel. And here we have something called a carrier protein or a transport protein that moves those molecules across the membrane. But with facilitated diffusion, we're always going to use these proteins. And that is one similarity between facilitated diffusion and active transport is that they both require the use of proteins. So with active transport, we're always going to use carrier proteins. Okay. Now, these molecules are traveling from low concentration to high, and it requires the use of energy, of ATP. So now I'm going to take us back to that do now question so we can see if we can identify each of these characteristics in that picture. Right, so with the do now question, we see that a carrier protein has been labeled. We are going to be using that carrier protein. ATP is noted in this molecule. We see that energy is required. And we can infer that because this is active transport, we're going from a low concentration up to a high concentration. So what these carrier proteins do is the carrier proteins physically or actively pump those molecules across the membrane. So it's like they get the molecule and then they push it across really, really fast and really hard. So those carrier proteins actively pump molecules across the membrane. Right? But whenever active transport is represented, you will always see ATP labeled. So you know that energy is required. All right, the last thing I'm going to show you guys today is this lovely diagram called Mount MCSM. So let's imagine for a minute that you guys are all National Geographic explorers off to observe the world. And one of your missions today is to climb the tallest mountain in the world, known as Mount MCSM. Right, this is the world's tallest mountain. All right, so the first thing I'm going to draw is you down here, ready for your mission. All right, you're giving me a thumbs up. You are ready to tackle this mission. Here's your backpack. You are ready. I'm going to give you a little adventurer's hat. You're giving me a smile. You're ready to climb this mountain. All right, so you're starting out at a pretty low point. And now it's time for you to climb that mountain. So I'm going to draw you about halfway up this mountain. You are physically crawling. You're down on all fours. You don't know if you can make it. It's a lot harder than you thought it was going to be. You're sweating. Sweat is pouring down your face. You still got your backpack though. You're still wearing your hat because you're an adventurer. But this is a lot harder of a climb than you thought it would be. You're going all the way from a low place up to a high place, and it's hard. You're having to use a lot of energy. You're climbing up this tall mountain, going from low to high. So, what type of transport would this be? This would be active transport because you are actively using energy to physically climb up that mountain. You're going from low to high concentration. It's pretty tough, but eventually you persevere, you make it, and you make it all the way up to the top of this mountain. Here you are celebrating. Oh, that's really ugly. Actually, you're taking a selfie. You want to show your parents that you made it to the top. I think you might have, oh, your legs kind of turned into amorphous blobs, but we're making it. All right, there's your adventurer's hat. You're taking a selfie. You're so proud of yourself. You made it to the top, but oh no. While you were celebrating, you accidentally tripped and you fell down the mountain. Oh, so here is a picture of you flailing in the wind. At least you got your selfie. You're falling down this mountain. Oh no. But you're still wearing your adventurer hat. All right, so here you are traveling from high concentration to low. Now, as you passively fall down this mountain, you're no longer sweating. You're just crying because you're falling down a mountain. But this does not require any energy. This is passive transport as you fall down from high to low concentration. So no energy is required. But eventually, miraculously, you land on your feet. Yay. And here you are rejoicing that you succeeded. You traveled up and down the mountain. You may have fallen, but you survived. Okay, so once again, remember that active transport is when you are going from low to high concentration and you're using energy. But then passive transport is when you're going from high to low and it does not require any energy. All right, so that's all I have for you guys today. Go ahead and complete your exit ticket. You've got 2 questions, and have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys tomorrow.